Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Texas Dialogue on Innovation and Defense. I have to apologize up front, a couple of technical challenges from here in Austin, but good morning and welcome to TDID, the Texas Dialogue on Innovation and Defense, where we strive for increased interaction and thickened understanding across our defense innovation team of teams in these crazy times. So first of all, I'd really like to thank you for taking the time out today and joining us here in this webinar. If you haven't met me, I'm Brian Cook. I'm your lead moderator for today's event. And along with Mike Garlington, we lead the Army Futures Command and Forces account for IBM here in Austin. I'll be joining our speaking panel today by Jorge Manresa, the VP of Federal Programs at Kent Factory, and we'll hear a short video on the upcoming Fed Supernova. Today we have quite a webinar planned. In the craziness of 2020, we started this dialogue. Our original reason for having these dialogues was to create discussions that were missing in the initial months of COVID. Those impromptu, often illuminating conversations between national security professionals that often bring forward challenges, opportunities, and collaborations were obviously missing. In addition, we know AFC and the Army are at a significant tipping point. With the onset of Project Convergence, really questionable budget at the moment, in the last full year before it takes the helm as the Army moves to put modernization as its priority in FY23. But this year, we wanted to do something different. With Capital Factory's newly shaped Fed Supernova, we wanted to address what most of us feel is at the true heart of the issue at defense innovation and modernization, culture. And that's why I specifically tried to invite a younger crowd. I'm hoping the panel will illuminate us with their thoughts and stoke your ideas on how to crush it with culture, to help those of us who are a bit older and maybe higher ranking to forget our biased, preconceived notions of what right looks like so we can get beyond innovation theater and drive for meaningful, sustainable change to enable our Army to compete at the highest level in this worldwide stage. Our purpose is straightforward: to provide a rich dialogue centered around culture and defense innovation in preparation for Fed Supernova and other upcoming events like AUSA. We'll do that with two panels, the first of which will kick off immediately following this intro. That first panel is a strategic operational perspective. We call it culture from the 50,000 foot level. We'll hear from James, Vito, and Kristen, and after some Q&A, we'll take a short break for some networking. Then Jorge will lead our second panel, focusing on cultural momentum at the operational and tactical level, after which we love to hear, once again, your thoughts, questions, and insights. We'll pull it all together at the end for a short conclusion, show you what we're up to about Fed Supernova, and total us out for the day. What we're out for is a thinking understanding on the role of culture and defense innovation. And since we consider feedback a gift, you could tell us whether we reached that objective or not. So with that, let me introduce our speakers. First is James Julius, who hails from Pittsburgh and leads VISIMO, the company that's providing the AI toolkit known as COIUS to both the AI2C, the Army Intelligence Integration Center, and the JAKE, the Joint AI Center. James founded VISIMO in 2016 and serves as the president and CEO. He spent the last 15 years working in and alongside all sizes of businesses, including Fortune 100, family-run businesses, and the middle market. James earned his MBA and his MBA from Carnegie Mellon, and both his MS IT Project Management and BS in Information Systems from Robert Morris University. James is also notably the son of an Army veteran and former member of the AFC team. Next is Lieutenant Colonel Vito Errico, who serves as a CEO and director of the AFC Software Factory, a seasoned Army aviator with combat tours in OIF and OEF. Vito is a graduate of West Point, Georgetown, and Yale universities, with reps in the Pentagon and DC in the SecDef's internship program, as well as CNAS, the Center for National American Security, as a national security fellow. During his time at Yale, Vito worked at the Yale CEO Institute and interacted closely with the Fortune 500 CEOs. Subsequently, Forbes magazine and Poets and Quants named him as a top business school graduate in 2019. Vito's current off-duty habits are changing diapers and watching Sesame Street with his kids. Our next speaker is Lieutenant Colonel Kristen Salling, the acting director of people analytics at ASA, MNRA. Kristen is an accomplished engineer turned operations research and systems analyst, data scientist, and policy leader with experience throughout DoD with tours in Operation Iraqi Freedom, Indo-PACOM, West Point, and the Pentagon. Kristen recently served as the Chief Analytics Officer in the Army's Talent Management Task Force. Kristen holds an operations research and engineering degrees from West Point, Missouri University of Science and Technology, and UVA. Next, our second panel I'll introduce now, we have Major Zach Walker, the Director of Innovation at the Texas Army Air National Guard, and the former former Texas lead of the Defense Innovation Unit. Zach brings 20 years of national security experience from his work at NSA, CIA, the Army, and Air Force, along with the Army Software Factory, and a handful of combat tours. Zach holds degrees from UT Arlington, the LBJ School at UT Austin, and MIT. Next is CW4 Brian Masters, a program manager focused on solutions integration at 18th Airborne Corps and Project Ridgeway. Brian's a seasoned electronic missile technician with experience in Iraq, Afghanistan, Fort Lee, Fort Bragg, and Lockheed Martin. Brian holds degrees in business analytics, enterprise resource planning, and organizational leadership from American Military University, University of South Carolina, and Central Michigan University. We'll round it off with Major Evan Adams, a seasoned armored cavalryman, planner, and innovator with tours from Fort Hood, OIF, Fort Benning, Italy, Germany, and Fort Campbell. He most recently served as the current ops planner for 101st Division Headquarters. Evan is a graduate of Sam Houston University and the Army's Officer Candidate School. Additionally, on the team today is my co-host, as I mentioned, Jorge Manresa. Today's agenda, as I alluded to before, is quite simple. Following our first panel with James, Vito, and Kristen, we'll move to a 15 to 20 minute question and answer period. At 10:20, a short 10-minute networking break. At 10:30, we'll start our second panel with Zach, Brian, and Evan, moderated by Jorge, followed by another Q&A for 15 to 20 minutes. And then at 11:10, we'll wrap it all up, hear a short video about Fed Supernova, and move off to our day. With that, I'd like to jump into panel one, culture from a 50,000 foot level. There are many of us that know, after careful study and research, that culture is the key to our success in modernization and regaining our strategic superiority in great power competition. But how and where is culture changing? Is that culture changing in the Army and the DoD? And how can we catalyze success and knock down the obstacles that stand in our way? So I'll ask our first panelists, James, Vito, and Kristen, to answer three questions. First, what is their role in defense innovation? Second, what do you see, where do you see things going right in culture around innovation? And where do we need to do some work? After that, we'd love to hear from you, our audience, to ask some questions of our panelists. You can do that by posting your questions in the chat, and we'll relay them to the team. So let's get started, James, and hear from you first, the CEO of VISIMO in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Great. Hey, thanks a lot, Brian, and thank you so much to the other panelists for the pleasure of me being able to join with you guys. I certainly feel outclassed by this group. So anyway, thank you so much. So as far as our role in defense innovation, VISIMO is, as Brian alluded to, is the primary developers for COES, which is being used currently with AI2C, certainly will be used in the future with Jake. We also are an innovation contractor that work closely with the Air Force in a variety of projects on that side as well. So our job is to help from the private sector, and as a organization that is much smaller and more nimble than the United States Army, is to bring forward what we see is great opportunities for innovation and development, and the things that we do really, really good, and partner that with the Army. And as far as the things we see going right in the culture around innovation, we've had the chance to work with some really great operators inside of the Army. Notably Lieutenant Colonel Isaac Faber here out of AI2C here in Pittsburgh. He's been a great partner from Jump Street. Really helping communicate a very solid vision, and helping us to partner. We work closely with academic organizations like the Software Engineering Institute here in Pittsburgh. So it's the cooperation between the private sector, the academic sector, and the public sector and the Army of bringing forward some really great ideas. And, and the other piece that works really, really well is setting really good expectations, but at the same time, holding everybody mutually accountable. So as we move forward and we make iterative progress, we are able to hold each other accountable and know that we are making small bits of progress and towards a bigger mission and vision without really, worrying kind of too hard where we are in today and where that aligns to, are we on path for 30, 60, 90 days out? And they're giving us a lot of room and a lot of runway for success and the opportunity to fail fast, fail forward on some of these really higher end initiatives. As far as some of the things that need work, we have been really privileged to experience a very young, great, nimble team here with the AI2C. I think in any organization, sometimes there is resistance towards our similar organizations in the Army maybe trying to solve similar problems, and so we've heard that could there potentially be, whether it be political or other kinds of issues internally that are being solved for, and we see that even on the private sector, on very large organizations, that there could be different agendas that are trying to be achieved, and that whenever you have competing agendas, that can sometimes stifle innovation. And so one of the things that we try to do from the outside is we try to bring up early and often, what are the things that we do, how do we recognize those problems, and we try to be very forthcoming, and that is something I push down throughout my company. And as it rolls up to me, and whether it be the different people in my chain of command, and as we roll that forward into the AI2C's chain of command and up through AFC, we try to live those values and understand that while there may be political issues that drive, certain types of conversations internal to the Army, we try to bring forward, we're always going to bring up early and often what those things are. And so to Brian's point around, how can you crush it with culture? We try to do that on a small scale, and hopefully that bleeds forward into a bigger scale with some of the things that we're working on.
No, awesome comments, James. Thanks so much for that. And it's a really good perspective about how you work in and around the team of teams that's up there in Pittsburgh. Most say, it's AI2C and Doug, Matty, and Isaac throwing their rocks at each other. I just had the chance to visit up there a couple of weeks ago, and it's a really wide and breadthful team. So with that, I'll pass it off to Kristen. Love to hear your thoughts, Kristen. Headquarters DA, bigger, wider, deeper. What are your thoughts?
Oh goodness, where do I start? So my role right now, I'm the director of Army People Analytics. We're not a new office. We're just kind of a newly renamed office for the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. And the short summary is that we do pretty much everything with people data and with data people. So we've been charged with doing a large talent management project looking at the Army's data workforce, and also in reverse, using our people data to figure out how to identify and how to best manage these folks. That's been an interesting journey as we try to figure out how to break through a lot of the existing processes that we have in the Army for how we manage our people and how we manage our requirements. So we've been spending a lot of time taking a look at these, mapping them out, and trying to figure out how to make these things spin faster, how to get these all updated so that we can use automation, where we can bypass some of the decisions, where we can manage people more flexibly in terms of their competencies, rather than the two single data points we used to use to manage people, which were just great in MOS. It's been a process that has been both inspiring and frustrating, I think I can say, just because I think we have leadership that the single largest batch of leaders that I've seen, and I've been in the Pentagon now for 6 years, which is kind of unusual, who are open to new ways of doing business, who are not just open to change, but looking for change. They know we can do this better. They know we can do it faster. So a lot of what we do, and a lot of what I think we're doing well, is try to meet them in the middle, where we can find these efficiencies, where we can change these processes. And I think we're doing what a lot of the Army is doing, is just pulling together these small, scrappy teams of these just coalitions of the willing who are ready to roll up their sleeves and actually make stuff happen. Conversely, we're trying to do the same thing as we reach down into our different commands and see where we can meet them in the middle as well. We want to not centralize everything, but what we want to do is create different frameworks where we can collect requirements, and we can push platforms, we can push data, we can push capabilities to where it's needed. Just the sheer amount of work that's going on in that space, to me, has been extremely inspiring. And a big part of that has been both the positive aspects and then the negative aspects of Army culture. And when I say the positives and the negatives, our primary culture as an Army is built largely around, mission completion and creating teams. And we do really well when we remember that. When we start looking at the additional trappings and the processes by which we've done this and stay rigid to those processes, they get in our way. Instead of looking at how we do the Army mission and how we build teams in more flexible and more modern ways. So we've seen a lot of successes. We've seen obstacles, but I think we're doing a lot of great work in breaking those down. And I've just been really impressed in the progress we've made in the last couple of years.
No, thanks for that, Kristen. That's insightful and really important to think about. Go back to first principles about how do you really want to think that? But it's also to hear that we have open-minded thinkers that want change in the building, in and around the building. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, Vito. And I'd love to hear what's going on in the software factory, and your perspective on great change and great cultural change.
Yeah, thanks, Brian, and it's an absolute honor to be able to share the screen here with not just you, Brian, but obviously James and Chris, who from time to time we find ourselves working together or on panels like this. So it's nice to see you both. First of all, on behalf of General Murray and Sergeant Major Crosby, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and really from the whole Army Software Factory family that I'm representing here today. Our role or our niche in defense innovation is to operationalize software development in a way that provides empirical data to people like Chris on how this might work. You have to start with experiments, and you have to learn, and that whole build, test, get feedback, and then rebuild idea, build, measure, learn. I think that's fundamentally the idea behind the Army Software Factory. At the end of the day, the mission for us is just born right out of Futures Command, and that's to prototype a future force design. If you believe that we need soldiers at the edges of the battlefield able to code in an ad hoc, mission-oriented manner, how do you begin building that mechanism? To Chris's point about bureaucracy, how do you begin to build that mechanism and build that muscle movement into the system now? And that's not going to happen overnight, right? And we're a part of that big experiment. I think as we operationalize some of that, what we've been encouraged by is the amount of the groundswell of innovation that is occurring across all three services, all the big services, specifically as it relates to JADC2. For those of you out there who don't know what that means, Joint All-Domain Command and Control. And for each service's unique individual mission that they're going to play with respect to JADC2, and then how that fuses together, to bring joint and coalition partners together on the same page. That battle space is not changing. It's just the different roles that each services plays, calls for different choices, and that innovation is a key to deciding what choices we make. I think, from my perspective, what's going right here at Futures and at the Army Software Factory is, we've really gotten some precedents set here that should arm people like Chris and James with a better ability to do their jobs and advocate for us. And what I mean by that is, a rank agnostic unit selection process. One of the going in assumptions for the Army Software Factory was, hey, while lowering the barriers to entry from outside the Army to raise the level of tech talent is important, let's not overlook the existing or hidden tech talent that already lies inside the Army. And we really don't care if that person is a captain with a PhD or a completely self-taught autodidact who happens to be a 68 Whiskey combat medic specialist sitting in one of the maneuver brigades on pick your favorite base. As we think about getting the Army ready to fight on future battlefields, ideas need to be valued over rank, and competencies need to be valued over rank in a way that legacy processes haven't enabled us to do so to this point. So that's been a big win, I think, across the board for everybody involved. The partnerships with academia and industry, sort of like James talked about, senior leader buy-in on these partnerships has been fantastic. I know I can only speak really with authority for the software factory. So, the tech companies here in Austin, the educational partners with Austin Community College, University of Texas, have been fantastic here locally, and then abroad with Stanford and Harvard and MIT and Hacking for Defense. I mean, we're not going to be able to innovate without those quality partnerships. And then, I just go back to, I see the world very, very similar to the way that Chris sees it with respect to, what the Army historically, when we're really successful is decentralized mission command, where we empower down. And that's really the secret sauce to innovation. Anybody who's taken a class in innovation knows that. But when you over centralize or you forget about unity of effort, you can kind of get off track. And so that's our job, is to work together and to collaborate in a way that fosters the right kind of innovation. So that's pretty much the way that we see the world here in Austin right now. But thanks again, Brian.
No, thanks, Vito, for unpacking all that and kind of explaining that. I've known you for a while, and many of the people obviously on the screen and here in Austin, and we know that there's a culture play at hand at Army Software Factory, right? It's very, if you go and experience it, you feel it, you know that there is a requirement, a critical requirement, as some center of gravity theorists would say, that code on the edge in future battlefields. And throughout the whole Army, by the way, the whole data fabric needs to have coders, right? And we don't want to depend on big industry to do all that. By that way, that'd be clunky, and it will be dependent on a contracts and acquisition program that's kind of broken. So with your comments turning up, I'm going to tell the audience and apologize to the audience about the hop-in links challenges. But if you're up with us, please push in the chat any of the questions that you have for Kristen or James or Vito. So I'm going to lead off with one, and it comes from Mike Garlington, my wingman here in Austin. But we often talk about Cotter's change model. It's one of the change models used in the Army to describe how to get after great organizational change. And one of the things that Cotter says is, how do you get short, quick wins, sustainable wins, but how do you get short wins? Where do you guys see that? And this is to any of you. Where do you see that happening? And is it acceptable in the Army to have a short one and make it a big deal?
Well, if nobody else is going to jump on that one right away, I'm going to go ahead and jump on it and say all the work that Vito and the Software Factory crew are doing is one of them. They were able to stand up that capability really quickly and provide a value proposition for the Army on what we could do by, just exactly as he said, sourcing within our numbers this unplumbed talent that we hadn't been able to visualize before, and we really hadn't figured out how to effectively utilize, or we haven't really explored the need. Now they've got this experimentation mentality out there. They're going to go and they're going to try things with people of all different grades. They're going to break down a lot of the concepts that the Army is held to in terms of, kind of a seniority-based fairness model. It's like, let's look at the talent, let's look at the capability, and let's get the people who are capable out to where they're most needed, regardless of, some kind of a fairly antiquated queuing methodology that I think we've stuck to. So that's one example I think that we've really done. Vito, we're kind of taking credit for you guys and your innovations, just saying, hey, the Army did some great innovation here. But it's something that I think we all need to take and realize and celebrate. It's like, look, this concept works. We can do this. And, if we are smart about this, taking these quick wins and translating them to cultural and organizational change, we can say, look at the processes that we put in place to get this to work. Look at the things that didn't work. Let's take the whole system and figure out what needs to change in our force management models, what needs to change in how we do distributed kind of hub and spoke type teaming. How do we actually get the Army thinking about remote and distributed work, product-based teaming? We can go way out there with this, and it kind of spirals from there. This is kind of where we're hoping that the conversations continue to go.
I'll just jump on what Chris was saying. First of all, obviously we appreciate it, Chris. That was very kind of you to say. I think, Kotter's change model, we talk about things in sort of like a static or a discrete environment where, your wins don't have secondary or tertiary effects. And that's not the case in the Army, especially when you talk about, scaling innovation and some of the bureaucratic dynamics that go on. The last thing that anybody wants to do is get a perceived short-term win at the expense of another, important party or another important stakeholder in the process. You want to do things collaboratively. So that's one of the lessons, I think, across the board that we all need to recognize here is that individual efforts that are sort of like doing their own thing are great locally, but you want to be able to make sure that everybody can take credit for the win. And that's something that I think we really internalize here at the Army Software Factory. All of our products, all of our projects right now, we're partnered up with operational units and subordinate commands around the Army. The idea is to partner with others to raise the level of innovation, not to just innovate ourselves. And so that's something that we're really trying to focus on here.
That's awesome. So it's a really good answer to the question. And it really, the synchronicity, right? The challenge when I was in uniform with the AFC was that someone would be doing something really good or even really bad and nobody else knew. And you had the capability to either catalyze it or solve it, but you couldn't get the right people on target to do that. And it's a higher end problem, right? And something you guys are really getting after at Software Factory. And I know in people analytics too, Christian. So you're all in this really neat kind of Venn diagram where the people that are doing this business are strange data people from the Army, right? And I'm an armor cavalryman who had to learn all this stuff as I transitioned out of the Army. But how is it? How are we going to take the tribe that has to get all this done and give them importance and standing in the Army so that they'll stay? Right? I mean, that's part of my question, but is there a plan to move forward, MOS-ish, that type of stuff that you can talk about? And what would you think about that, James? Would you like some help in that range?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump on. You guys know I can talk about this stuff forever. As far as what we're doing in terms of MOSs and everything else, what I think we're trying to do is break out of that as being the primary means of managing people. Coming back to what we're doing in terms of talent management and people analytics, we would love to see emerging requirements come up and not having to stand up and take the time to do a full roll up, a full new MOS. We've got some existing ways to do this. We've got ASIs, we've got skill identifiers or PDSIs. We've got a number of different ways to categorize people, but we've also got a lot of data and a lot of great data systems. So we're very grateful for the things that VISIMO has been putting together with COEAS, so more people can dig into that information. We've got Vantage, we've got Advana coming out of OSD. We've got, in people analytics, we have our person event data environment, which is rolling into the cloud and becoming C-People. We have lots of ways that we can look at our individuals where we don't need to just categorize them and assume that they have the necessary characteristics for a particular type of job. We can look down into those characteristics that we're now categorizing through the Army Talent Attribute Framework. And we can say, hey, look, we've got this emerging capability. There's a demand in our market now that says more people need this. Okay, well, we've got people who've got a lot of these characteristics. Let's go ahead and push them to those different kinds of assignments. So to the point that what Software Factory is doing, where they're not looking at rank and MOS specific, they're providing this training for a large variety of applications. We don't have to take somebody who joined the Army and tell them, okay, well, you're not doing Army stuff anymore. You're just going to do software. Because a lot of them want to put, they want to put their maroon berets on, and they want to go jump out of airplanes, and then they also want to code. So we're creating an environment where they can do that. And I think that is the piece. I mean, just one more point, and then I'll get off the stage. But for retention, we look at quality of life and quality of work. I think by having more flexible ways to get people assigned to the problems that interest them, we give them that quality of work. And by providing the number of different things in the Army environment that attract people and the ability to take part in those things along with exercising their skills, we provide both quality of life and quality of work.
And Brian, what I can echo, a lot of things that Kristen is talking about on a, arguably compared to what we're going through is a significant macro scale, right? But what we experience on a micro scale, and we've both consulted on it, and we've worked with human resources experts. We have just mountains of data that we've poured through to validate this, and we've worked on projects with AFWorks as well to kind of dig into these projects. Is that hiring and starting to bring people up that are based on capabilities rather than the functional skills that they've currently acquired. As we deploy our own people internally, there is a shift in the younger personnel. I might look younger. I'm not, and I good genes, I guess. And so as we're hiring people out of college or a few years removed, the things that motivate them are going to be markedly different than the things that motivated me as I entered my career 20 years ago and subsequent generations before that. And so as we are considering what the set of things are, as an organization, I need to be able to understand if we're responsible for helping drive innovation in, very large organizations, whether it be in the Fortune 100 or United States Army, it's to understand, well, what are the things that we ourselves are doing to push the envelope as far as innovation goes? And so, for example, and Kristen mentioned, well, what can we, as the Army, start thinking about from product teams? And what we are doing internally, not only we have product teams, we have R&D teams, and we're pulling people out of their traditional, operations responsibilities and putting them into opportunities to drive research and development. They do that also from personnel and professional development opportunities as well. And so there's an integration opportunity for them to continue to broaden and develop their skills. But we do that with a focus of, okay, if we're not just going to, focus on something necessarily that they're interested in that doesn't connect back to a broader initiative, whether it be across the government or across, private industry that we're seeing. But we understand where are the trends and those things going. So as people say, hey, I'm interested in, learning a new language. I'm interested in one popular coding language in the data science side of things is a language called Julia. So it's like, well, what can we use to take, these leading languages, understand when we're talking to our partners, across the private and public sectors, where is that set of things going? And how can we as leaders start to hold ourselves accountable to helping to build this really high-end set of capabilities to promote quality of life, to promote cross-functional skills? And, and at the same time, some of the same issues that you all are trying to get your arms around, and then also be able to push things like retention. Well, we're trying to solve the same thing, but just on a much smaller scale. So it's, 100%. And then what we try to do is, act as, the type of organization so that the next time we have a project with a partner in the public sector, they're not seeing fresh new faces all the time because we have bigger companies that are scooping up our talent. We have a phenomenal retention rate because of our culture. So, we're able to maybe solve some of these problems a little bit faster because we are smaller. But hopefully at the same time as we are partnered with, great people, whether it be on the Software Factory side or folks like Kristen, we can understand, well, can we take those ideas and push it through on a smaller level so that can we actually get data points and they'll share that back up so that we act as a opportunity to be a vetting ground for larger organizations.
No, Vito, I didn't know if you wanted to jump in there. I've got another great question on the hold.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's juicier if I, throw things at the monitor in disagreement, but I just completely agree with both James and Chris. And it's, what we're seeing at the software factory, it provides the empirical evidence of what, they're both talking about. And Chris sits at the policy level, and hopefully this sort of stuff provides ammunition for her to go get the change she needs to go make. But bottom line is, the legacy idea of sort of like a binary approach to talent management or human capital, because people think, oh, it's either a data job or it's not, and there's no in between. And right now, there's some truth to that because of how people are managed. And so if you're in a non-technical MOS, but you're a technical person, that presents a challenge, and vice versa. So anything that we can do to begin to blur that line is a step in the right direction.
No, that's awesome, Vito. So kind of going off of that, and I know all of you have a stance and seen the other services and the other places in academia where this type of work is going. Any good examples or maybe bad examples of where we're trying to get the Army away from, we only like the stuff that we create, type of stuff. A lot of times the Army idea is the only idea. How you spell joint is ARMY. That's doesn't work in this arena. So any good examples there of how you guys are sharing across with your collaborative teams?
I think it might be easy for us to do on the policy side, just because we're all kind of sitting usually in the same building. I'm not part of a remote work pilot. I'm only up there about once a month. But we have the DoD CDO Council, where we get in and we just start throwing around how we're going to do all these different talent management things, how we're going to categorize, have a good working relationship, not just with the Army CDO, but with the other services CDOs and with Mr. Spurk, the DoD CDO. And there's a lot of federal outreach. We've got the Federal Data Council that we sit in on. So we've had a lot of these discussions. Every once in a while, we kind of get into some of the service component specific stuff, but I think it's been recently we've had a lot of sharing across our organizations. And I do want to chalk a lot of that up to all the digital collaboration that we've had going on lately. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, COVID was an amazing instigator for collaboration. I mean, we come into these panels, we come into various different planning teams. I'm able to drop in on the AFC planning team. They come in and drop in on mine. And we're kind of looking around here and seeing familiar faces, because it's like, hey, okay, we're this great big community, this collaborative community that we've built. And now it just makes it a whole lot easier to reach out if I'm trying to be there when AFC or the AI2C or when any of our other entities have a policy question or an obstacle, then they got a face to it, and just they can send me a note. I can start working on it. Or if I've got questions on some of the things that we need to adjust and trying to figure out if I'm going to throw a wrench in their plan, if I take something and tweak it, I got people I can reach out to. And I think we're seeing that a lot too on the partnerships with academia and industry. So this has been it's been great just to be able to pull up your app of choice and do a video call with somebody and actually get some stuff done.
I'll add to the in addition to the virtual teaming, where I see is some of the sister services. The Army has a lot, not just to learn, but has learned a lot from the amazing work they've done with respect to Precedent for continuous RMF. Some of the Enterprise Cloud Management Agency and the CIO of the Army, taking the Army out of a legacy cybersecurity mindset and really putting an effort into actualizing DevSecOps. And that wasn't, candidly, that wasn't an Army thing, right? That the Air Force was first on that, and the good work done by Lauren Knotzenberger, who's now the CIO of the Air Force. I mean, we only really have that precedent because of her. And ironically, for those of you who are outside of the cybersecurity field, it's a lot like the legal field, right? Like you just need to establish some precedent, and then through reciprocity, the rest of the services can ride off of that. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't call that out as something that the Army's really learned from, and we thank those folks for that.
James, I'd love to hear where you think there's some great collaborations. I know I've been working with CMU for a bit now, and it's really amazing to talk about AI with CMU and get blown away cognitively. But where do you see that interaction happening up there in Pittsburgh at AITC?
Yeah, I mean, right, exactly what you had said. The Software Engineering Institute, they've been partners with us, all along the way. Matter of fact, even before we got involved, with AI2C was still just AI task force, and the FCI was really working closely with Lieutenant Colonel Faber and really putting forward that vision, and they've been a great partner to us because we have great thought leaders on our team. A lot of times in what I've seen previously, several years ago, you have very large organization, then you have an academic organization, then you have the builders, and everybody feels like they have their roles to play, and they're siloed, right? So you have the thought leaders, you have the builders, and then you have the vision or the customer people. And what's great about what we're seeing in this partnership is that we're all playing similar roles, and we're not exactly worried about bumping into each other. So we're playing a thought leader role, we're playing a builder role. We have folks within AI2C that are doing thought leadership in building, and we all are mission minded, and we're focused on what is the objective at hand, right? So we're very focused right now on PC21, and we have some great demos we're getting ready for next week, and then our focus then shifts towards other key objectives along the way after that. Outside of the Army space, one of the things that we're doing in the private sector is we are bringing forward a lot of those same relationships that maybe had existed previously, but other relationships that maybe didn't exist as much, right? So we work very closely with University of Cincinnati, and we're bringing that forward to a lot of great opportunities within the Air Force, and now also bringing that back into opportunities within the Army because of their expertise in very, very specific areas. And so, I think we found great, value in the academic and industry and public sector partnerships, and we continue to try to be a champion for that.
Yeah, so it's we like to say innovation is a team sport, right? There's just no way around it. I mean, even coming from a large company like IBM, right? There's a lot at hand here. I mean, our research is amazing in quantum and all those. Well, but if you can't team up and work with CMU, work with the University of South Carolina, you work with People Analytics, with Army Analytics Group, you're not even in the room because you don't stand a chance to really get forward, I guess is another question. So I'm going to roll off the COVID, dovetail off the COVID discussion. How is the Army and the Army Software Factory making it, supporting the remote instances of working, and so that the soldiers, the officers, the NCOs just can't get to post? Is that happening? Do you think it's really good? I know you're a great example of it, Kristen, how you're doing the study.
Now, everybody likes to talk about that one. There are actually 3 going on 4 of us assigned to the Pentagon, but we're in all different places. I'm based out of Orlando, Florida, so I've got my support over at DevCom Soldier Center. We have one of our folks up at West Point. We have one at Fort Benning, and we have one heading to Dallas. So we've got a number of folks who are just kind of spread out, trying to show that you don't have to be in the building all the time. You don't even have to be in a physical building in order to collaborate. In fact, it's actually easier. Classification side, I do have to go to get supported for secure teleconferencing, but for the most part, a lot of the collaboration I do is unclassified, or it's with academia and industry. So it's been, I would say, fairly seamless. A lot of that is due to a lot of the protocols that we have in place for COVID, where we have everybody using digital technology, because that's just kind of how we have to do work. The piece that we're having to work on and kind of remind the Army is that in order for this to work and continue working as we get the back to the office plans in place, is that we have to keep this collaboration going. We have to keep the digital tools. We have to keep planners thinking about that, so that they're not just going to go and snap back to the way we used to do business, where everybody's, sitting in my favorite example is we have so many meetings where we sit in a conference room with all these wonderful screens around us and everybody has their printed slides. It's like, we can't do that. We can't go back to, the QuadCon phone on the table anymore. We've got some momentum here. And if we do, not only are we going to lose the ability to collaborate with our remote workers, but we're going to lose the ability to bring in all our stakeholder organizations into some pretty critical conversations. So we don't want to lose that.
Vito, James, anything to add? Pretty much the same.
Yeah, I mean, I want to beat a dead horse, but you got to think about it too. The technology helps us reach a wider amount of people. So as the Army not just looks at reorganizing the people it has already, but also reaching people that it hasn't touched yet and bringing them into the Army, which is a big part of the future of the United States Army and modernization. And as the workforce, like the no kidding, like U.S. workforce gets really, really comfortable with digital work and working from home, working on base or only in certain locations is going to be much less palatable for some of the best talent in the country. So we've got to really open up to the ideas that Chris just laid out for most of us.
Yeah, awesome. So one last question, and I'm going to take this one from me. So I was always, in my last couple of years in the Army, I was challenged mentally and physically. And I often saw the leaders that came through the War College were on the teetering edge of staying healthy and keeping going. What do you guys do to be on the top of your game? Any tips, tools from the Titans type of stuff? And don't be repping the coffee, the best coffee you like, but anything that you really like to do to keep you on top of your game.
Put it on your calendar. I mean, everything goes on the calendar. My workouts, my morning workouts, I go, and it's a nice thing in Florida, we're actually getting into some good weather. I go run around the lake, I dodge alligators. But if it's not on the calendar, I don't make the time for it. And you really kind of got to book in those little wellness breaks, because otherwise you leave that white space, you're going to fill it with something, and you're not going to fill it with the time that you need to either digest an idea or just kind of take a breather and regroup a little bit. One of the things I really wish we would do is even just adjust our calendar software to book things for like 45 minutes, 55 minutes instead of back-to-back a solid hour, just so you could kind of have that, okay, let's kind of bring it back. Let me refresh the coffee. Let me get my head in gear. But you really just got to block out that time.
So to piggyback there, we're doing some of those things. We've adjusted basic calendaring to cut, 5 or 10 minutes, short. We're a full Microsoft shop, right? So we have things like focus time that is built in for everybody, leaders and individual contributors throughout the organization. And it's easier for me to do this in a smaller organization. I keep on couching that, because I'm surrounded by people in very, very large organizations. But we mandated that we don't have any meetings on Fridays at all. It gives people the space to operate and actually just do their work. But we have there. I think there's an opportunity and a need to not only put things on calendars, but there's sometimes if I used to use calendars and emails as my mechanism to manage my workday, and I found myself just constantly living in Outlook, and it has made it very hard. I was judging my productivity of the day based on how many emails I still had in my inbox, and eventually that's just an exercise in futility. And so one of the things that we have here in our organization is we do a lot of asynchronous meetings. We have a great planning tool, and so we use that as a mechanism to gather our stand-up, so we don't have to. I have one of my leaders here in the organization that said, if we have a meeting that goes 5 minutes over and we have people that are sitting there who don't need to be there, and this is an organization where there's only a dozen people around the floor, and he's like, if only 3 people need to be in that last 5 minutes, do you know that basically by the end of the month we've given up like a full or half of an FTE, if we could have just gotten work done. And he's our chief data scientist, right? So that's his job, is to pull this stuff apart. And so moving to asynchronous, communication and an opportunity to blast stuff out and keep people on the same page, but also doing this really good planning execution. Are we holding ourselves accountable to planning multiple days out for the individual things that we need to do? Are we measuring the success by how many things are we getting off of our plate and giving ourselves the freedom to, accomplish other things? Again, I couched at the beginning and I'll close at the end. We're a smaller organization, so we have the ability to go and get new software, to do these things, to test these things out. But we're seeing, great success. And we started doing some of these things in response to COVID, right? Because we can't just have a stand up and we're going to gather on the table. But we're persisting a lot of these things as a result.
Yeah, I'm probably the absolute worst person to ask this question to. It's been 2 years of an absolute dead sprint, and very much like standing up a tech startup. But what I could, just thinking about what James and Chris said, love what you do. Breaking legacy culture is taxing. It's emotionally taxing. It's not as simple as conventional army or military operations. So if you don't love it, it's probably you're not the right person for it. That'd be my main message, Brian.
No, thanks, Vito. So we started a little bit late, so I kept it going. But I'm going to take this moment to change us up and head towards the networking. So everybody who's on, hop in, to include James, Vito, and Christian. You can join in with the networking session too. If you want, we've been going for a while, go grab a snack or some water. Feel free, to take that short break. But the networking feature in Hop In is a really cool piece of it where we can interact with the other audience members. It's fun, easy to use, and great way to engage, of course. On the left hand, if you're on Hop In, on the left-hand side of the screen, click the networking icon to get there. You're not going to want to miss the next session. Jorge's going to take the realms from me. And we're going to hear from Zach, Brian, and Evan as we come off the break. So with that, let's take a 10-minute networking break. Thank you all for coming up. I am very, very honored to have you all come up and have your insights shared with a great audience. So thanks once again to Kristen, Vito, and James.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I hope you've been enjoying the Crushing It with Culture webinar put on by IBM and helped out with Capital Factory. I'm Jorge Manresa. I'm the VP for Federal and Defense Program here at Capital Factory. And I want to welcome all of you this morning to our next topic, which is Let's Get Tactical. What is culture of innovation like in the units? So I've got three very special guests that I'd like to introduce. We have Lieutenant Colonel Zach Walker. He's our Director of Innovation at the Texas Air National Guard. We also have Chief Warrant Officer Brian Masters, who's a Program Manager for Solutions Integration at the 18th Airborne Corps, and Major Evan Adams. He's current Ops Planner at the 101st Division Headquarters. I'm telling you, this is going to be a really interesting topic. We're going to dive deep, get a little tactical as to what innovation is doing and where it's going at the unit level here with some of these Air National Guard and Army soldiers, so airmen and soldiers alike. So if we could just bring our guest up onto the screen. So here we have Brian Masters. How are you doing, Brian? Oh, I think you might be on mute, sir.
Hey, Jorge, how you doing?
Awesome, great. Pleasure to see you, Brian. And then we've got Zach and Evan. So awesome, gentlemen. It's an honor to have you on our show today. And really, like I said earlier, let's get down to business and talking about getting tactical. What is defense innovation doing in your units? Let's let the good people watch and know what great things you're doing and how maybe we can push the envelope to continue to push the culture, change that culture, and crush the culture, right? That's keeping down defense innovation and what we need for our soldiers, airmen, guardians, and Marines, and can't forget our sailors, right? So I'm going to go ahead and start with Brian. Brian, my friend, let us know, just give us a little bit about what niche you're working on and what niche in defense innovation is helping your unit kind of move forward, move the needle in national security.
Hey, thanks, Jorge. So in 18th Airborne Corps, about a year ago, we started up an initiative called Project Ridgeway. And that initiative is to make the first AI-enabled corps. And it has 4 LOEs. The first LOE is culture, because we understand you have to have a culture that embraces innovation and embraces the tech that's available to us. So in 18th Airborne Corps, the way we look at innovation, especially in the tech space, is how do you solve today's problems with today's tech? So kind of the role that I play in Project Ridgeway is, and this is how I met Evan about a year ago, is to try to align problems that soldiers have every day. So these are daily problems that just, make kind of life suck a little bit, and then find technical solutions or tech solutions for that maybe makes their life suck just a little bit less. And then eventually, maybe that's innovation, making your life suck a little less, or solving today's problem with today's tech. But, that's kind of like the role that I play in Project Ridgeway in 18th Airborne Corps.
Man, that sounds super exciting. So glad to hear just kind of what you're doing at Project Ridgeway and how you bring kind of those LOEs together. So up next, I'm going to have Major Evan Adams. So over at the 101st Division Headquarters over there, what's your niche in defense innovation and how are you bringing that to bear, sir?
Yeah, hey, so to kind of tag on to what Brian was saying as well, is taking the current systems of record, which is really what we focus on, is taking the current tools that we have available and really configuring them to, as Brian put it, make life suck a little less, right? So like the most recent examples for the Afghanistan outload, we configured Vantage in a way to help give the commander better asset visibility and a better understanding of the process moving back and forward. So those are the kind of things, and really with Project Ridgeway, it's some of it is just training opportunities. So finding AWS or Azure environment training that we can plug soldiers into, or most recently our Coursera licenses that we've purchased. But also like kind of the coaching and mentoring aspect to it as well. You take smart guys like Brian and some of our other teammates and plug them into somebody with a legitimate problem that you can kind of coach them along to finding a solution.
Yeah, outstanding. So I'm really looking at now, it's like we're looking at Project Ridgeway. Something that's kind of standing out to me right now, it's that you guys are actually in 2 different bases, right? So you're talking about connecting now, something that's very rarely seen sometimes is sometimes bases don't work with bases, right? And you got Project Ridgeway right now where you've got 2 different bases, 2 different personnel looking at different levels of the problem and working together. So that's super awesome. I'm glad that I'm actually seeing that and hearing that in this panel itself. So excited to hear more in just a few minutes. And so back over to Zach. So Zach, over at the Texas Air National Guard, you're kind of leading innovation out there. And it's a little different where we've got our active duty components here on one side of my screen. We've got the Air National Guard and Guard components, so the reserve components doing innovation. So give us a little insight into what you're doing and where we're headed with the reserve and Guard components.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, Jorge. It's wonderful to be back in a Capital Factory event. So the thing about the Reserve and the National Guard that's so unique, and that's really a niche in defense innovation, I think the best way to call it is dual fluency. And that means a lot of different things, but most notably, you've got citizen soldiers, National Guard folks who 28 days a month, they're working in their jobs, whatever it is that they do to help bring prosperity to their families and make the United States a better place. And then 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, just like the commercials say, they put the uniform on and they go in and they do their military job. Sometimes, right? That's the idea, is that they have a military job, but in reality, they're doing COVID operations, they're doing hurricane response, they're doing refugee operations, they're doing the border mission, they're also in Iraq or Afghanistan. It's unbelievable what the National Guard has been tasked to do. And that really goes into the culture of the Guard, is we just get it done. I mean, we're not going to have the resources we need. We're not necessarily going to have the training in the sense that I don't know how many people were trained to do COVID-19 operations before 2020, but probably not a lot. But again, it's something that just had to happen. And that's what's great about the Guard, is you have that dual fluency to be able to live in the civilian world and bring that experience into the military side. And then for me, I try to live in that world as well, having come from the Defense Innovation Unit, to be able to essentially translate, to be able to talk to a startup or a company and say, Now I get it, understanding the multiples on product revenue, and that'll help them get a favorable term sheet for their Series A or Series B. But at the same time, being able to start talking nothing but acronyms, as you know, to be able to talk about colors of money and the FIDEP and the POM cycle and how RDT&E could be used here and known in here. You have to be able to live in both worlds, and if you can't, or if you don't, then you're not going to do justice to one side. So it's a lot of fun, but yeah, looking forward to continuing the conversation.
No, that's awesome. It's really cool to just see how our state equities, the Air and National Guard here in the state of Texas are using our citizen soldiers to kind of bring innovation to bear. And so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that here in a little bit. But one thing that is just really remarkable, right, is that when you look at the citizen soldier and kind of the culture changes that need to happen on the active duty components, what they can actually bring to bear. Because like you said, you have an opportunity where you have people who can be the Rosetta Stones because they've worked on the outside. They know the problems that are being faced with our soldiers and airmen and sailors on the inside. And then how can you kind of really merge some of those things together? So your role is really important. I hope to, I know Texas is doing that, a lot in innovation. I think some of the other states are starting to pick up. So maybe we'll dive into in a little bit is how we can bring some of that capability across to the active duty components, right? So that way we can share on what's being learned and really move culture forward, in ways that maybe it would be difficult from somebody who, like myself, been in the federal side for 21 years. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know. So really important part of the conversation that you can bring to bear here. So really quick, guys, let's talk a little bit about when we're talking about innovation. What type of entities are you working with in order to kind of open up the aperture within your own ecosystems to help bring innovation through, bring ideas through, and help push them through the culture that sometimes is really driven by, hey, if it wasn't developed here, or you've got command or headquarters saying, we're doing centralized control, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. What are we doing at your unit levels to try and breach, right, some of that old culture that we came up with, which is, centralized control, centralized execution. Really, don't do anything innovative unless we've approved it first. So give me your take on what you're seeing on the ground, and let the audience know, like maybe perhaps what they can do to help plug in. So I'll start with you, Brian. Sorry, Brian, did you hear me? Not sure if you're on mute or not. All right, well, we'll just move on. We'll maybe, Brian, you have difficulties with the mic right now, so we'll move that question over to Evan. So, Evan, from your perspective, what does innovation look like?
Hear me now?
I think we're having some technical difficulties here. All right, Evan, how's your mic?
Good. Hopefully, you tell me.
Well, we'll wait for Brian. I hear you loud and clear. So let's just wait for Brian to come back on. But in the meantime, let's have you, with that question I posed again, what does innovation look like at your units, and what type of entities are you working with, again, to help breach that kind of mentality of innovation and centralized command and control, and really helping to weave innovation into what we do day and day from your perspective?
Yeah, so it really starts with just showing value, and really trying to capitalize on something like a quick win with something like I mentioned earlier for the Afghanistan outload. Right, so we worked directly with Palantir, their Vantage team, which they sent some engineers down to Fort Bragg. I was there TDY, and I got to sit kind of next to two great engineers and then translate Army problems into engineer speak, and then engineer speak back to Army folks to kind of translate, like you were saying earlier, is like the Rosetta Stone of like what is possible and what can we do and what are the real problems, the root cause of some of these issues that were, and through that we were able to develop a solution that like instantly made their per stat a lot more accurate and a lot easier to report, and then it just naturally became a thing that they wanted because it was, it was way easier than managing a bunch of Excel spreadsheets. So some of the entities really, it boils back down to, well, what are the systems of record? What are the current tools I can use right now without getting in a contracting conversation or, having to discover some other company and bring them on, during a crisis. So it goes back to just speaking directly to them, plugging them into where the problem is, and then finding a solution that can instantly make everyone's, job a little better, and then demonstrating that value. And with that, we get buy-in and kind of continue the solution, continue to kind of improve our ways of doing business.
Awesome. So it's really much I used to work for General Cameron Holt, who's actually in charge of contracting. And he used to use a mantra in the Air Force called tools, not rules, right? So it is very much in that fashion that you guys you're looking at tools, not the rules, in order to make those connections and make the capabilities move forward. So that's really awesome. So if you want to coin tools, not rules for the Army, go right ahead. I'm sure General Holt will be super happy about that. So awesome. Thanks for that. Brian, over back to you. Hopefully we got a little bit better connectivity with you. So go ahead.
So are we back? Are we good?
Yep, I think we hear you loud and clear, brother.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I know for us in 18th Airborne Corps, like we get contracting, we get requirements, right? But we have problems every day that, might not have the time to go through the acquisition process to solve. That's why we say solving today's problem with today's tech. And it's about providing value like immediately. So if we have a tool, whether it's a tool that's available through A365, whether it's, building an access database, whatever. If there's something that we can sit next to the soldier or leader who has a problem and then, come up with an automated solution or something to help them out so that they can focus on a more, pertinent task, then, that's innovation, and that's providing value at the point of need, right? So that's kind of really what we try to focus on, whether it's, tactical innovation with our mission command systems, whether it's like managing COVID-19 vaccinations, or whether it's, outload of personnel for a real world mission, right? The U.S. soldiers have a myriad of problems that encompass both garrison and forward. And there's definitely opportunities to innovate and to add value immediately.
Wow, that's awesome. And Brian, so tell me a little bit. I mean, that is pretty awesome that you're able to do that, kind of match the soldiers with the tools and kind of get after certain problems. But when did that come about at the 18th? Is that something that came from the top and said, hey, go do that? Or is that kind of a grassroots movement that has permeated the top, and the top is now helping to embrace and to push out? Give us a little bit of history here.
So like, this is about culture, right? So if we're going to talk about culture, and I think Evan knows where I'm going to go with this, because I'm super proud of this accomplishment. He's smiling. So we're all dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic right now and vaccinations, and we're about to ramp back up again. So I think back in end of February, early March, the DHA, Department of Health Administration, came out with a way for beneficiaries to schedule COVID-19 vaccinations. That schedule wasn't generating unit-specific or installation-specific information with instructions. So General Carrilla, the 18th Airborne Corps CG, he's a very innovative guy. He spearheads this and champions it, and then that is infectious across the Corps. So what he did, instead of saying, hey, let me find a civilian company that can solve my problem, he said, Colonel Dan Kearney, the project director for Ridgeway, get one of your guys to see if they can solve this problem. So one of those guys ended up being me. And so what we did in a matter of 2 weeks, right, we created a system using CVR, so tools that were already fielded to us. Yeah. So we created a system where when a beneficiary schedules appointment through DHA, we automatically extract that data in a CSV file, drop it through a flow, an email notification goes out, that creates a data set, and then we use a tool called Power Apps that will have seated rights inside of CVR. And we created a mobile application that on 2 different sites, they were able to check people into their appointments and collect additional data. So that was saving them going through the Excel spreadsheets and adding names, hand jamming. And then at Sports USA, where we were like just kind of putting needles in soldiers' arms, counting them just, by category, age, and just, up, down, they had a butcher block and they were just making tick marks. So we just created an app that up, down with the category, it's real time. There's a dashboard that goes along with it. The CG gets an update every 15 minutes. It's up in the DJOC. But we did that in 2 weeks. And we did that by sitting next to the soldiers, and then, no kidding, sitting inside the CG's office with a dashboard up and making it look exactly how we wanted it to look. So, that's solving today's problems with today's tech. And then from March until now, that application that was created in 2 weeks has managed over 85,000 COVID-19 vaccinations on Fort Bragg, and we're going to expand it with a new mandate. So, that's just how we had a problem. And with culture from our top, we found tools that were already fielded to us to solve that problem. And it's been an enduring solution for the past, 6 months.
Wow. Wow, that is truly amazing. Thank you for sharing that, because that inspires me. You guys know kind of my background doing Air Force innovation and all that a little bit. But the idea that it came from grassroots and leadership empowered the soldier to use the tools that are right now to move it forward is definitely a huge cultural change, because instead of looking outward and outsourcing for the problem, look at where the real innovators are. Because I have found in my history in 21 years in the Air Force that the real solutions are actually closest to your airmen and your soldiers, the people are on the ground. Now, if we equip them with the tools and we provide them the top cover to go solve those problems, you get some really amazing results. So that's super awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now I want to kind of move over to Zach. Zach, there's a really kind of interesting play with the Texas Air National Guard and what they've done in innovation over the last few years. Could you bring us up into your world a little bit and tell us how Texas, from a Guard perspective, has started to work with units and other outside entities to bring innovation to bear? Go for it.
Yeah, so the legendary Alex Goldberg, who's certainly no stranger to Capital Factory, once told me that for every rule on active duty, there's an equal and opposite rule in the National Guard. Whether or not that's true, I don't know, but it certainly was part of the recruiting pitch for me to leave active duty and come over. And I think the spirit of that is, like I mentioned earlier, again, we're going to be pulled in so many different directions. We just have to figure it out. And maybe it doesn't mesh nicely with the rule that active duty has, but if we can get the tools, and to your point, Jorge, to make it work with best intentions, that's just what has to happen. So have to give a shout out to AFWorks. They spent a couple of years trying to figure out their niche in the space, and it was great to watch it unfold, because when they latched onto this small business innovation research program, and it's brilliant. Just take something that's underperforming. There's already money there. There's already authorities. It's almost like a sunk cost for the DoD, and just make it not suck. Really, I mean, honestly, that's what they were trying to do. It opened up this world to, at least on the Air Force side, suddenly giving units the ability to try these things out, try to bring in close to commercial technology to solve some of these problems, like Brian and Evan are talking about. The problems that the airman has just down on the ground where it's most important. Match that with the National Guard mentality of, again, we just need to get stuff done, and we have 21,000 soldiers and airmen that, in general, are willing to try new things, just want to get problem solved. And you put that together, and I think it was a great combination, because you had Air Force airmen in the Guard that had problems that needed to be solved. For example, some that I think are really resonant, and I think great for the startup community to understand. You need to order a part for a plane. It may just be a simple metal part, but that's not how it works. You can't just necessarily go print a part or get one from Home Depot. You have to go through the process with the rules, which perhaps unsurprisingly is going to take way longer and be exponentially more expensive than it should be, just because that's how the system was built. You take another example where you want to get barracks done, and so my first 10 years was in the Army. I like to say that I upgraded to the Air Force, perhaps defected, depends on who you ask, but I remember some of these National Guard bases sleeping. It is not exactly the Four Seasons. I mean, it's pretty rough. Some of them were, I think their heyday was a couple wars ago, and I mean like World War I. But again, it's just hard to get these kind of things done, because you got to follow the rules. You got to follow all the acquisition rules and the long lead times. And so another example of where I was so impressed with the Air Force is to say, well, what if we just 3D print our barracks? What if we take some of this emerging commercial technology? And that happened to be an Austin company, Icon 3D, doing unbelievable things. And we printed a barracks out at one of our National Guard bases. And so it's crazy. For those that know the defense community, the National Guard typically is known as the one that gets things last. They get what active duty breaks and sends off, or they get whatever it is that isn't being done. But in this opportunity, it really kind of flipped the roles. And the National Guard, because we have that supportive culture and this history of just needing to get stuff done, we found ourselves being able to really prototype some of the most emerging technology that I've ever seen in the DoD. Now, of course, the challenge, it's not just something to fix a problem for a single unit, right? It's great, right? The innovative spirit of airmen and soldiers, but if it doesn't scale, ultimately you're not going to really have that kind of capability once those people leave or rotate out. And that's the other thing that we're looking to do, is not just solve it for this one unit, this one squadron, although it may be great for them, but how does it scale across the entire Texas National Guard? And then frankly, how does it scale across the 54 states and territories that the National Guard supports? Because again, when there's another major hurricane or natural disaster or something crazy happens, you're going to call on the National Guard, and you're going to have all 54 there. And we need to find a way to make sure that we have capabilities that are scaled.
No, that's pretty phenomenal. Again, it's just looking at just the mindset that a scrappy guardsman needs to have, because they don't get the things that sometimes our active duty forces get. How do they kind of bring innovation together? How do they bring that mindset and then actually iterate on some potential hardware or even software type of solution? So it's really interesting how you guys can kind of take your environment, really flex it and leverage it, not only to help the Guard, but also maybe even bring some of those solutions through to the active duty components if they're participating jointly with you guys. So that's pretty awesome. So I want to just kind of bring it back around. This is kind of a question for all of you guys. This is a great opportunity. We got about 10 minutes left, but let's talk about from your perspectives and what you've seen, what you've been driving towards trying to get tools and not rules over to the warfighter. What in your minds still needs a lot of work, from a how do you execute innovation and kind of get those things transition to how you can help change the culture right within your leadership chain in order to make some of these things happen. So I'm going to start with Evan. You tell me what needs some work still in your ecosystem.
Yeah, I could go on for hours. So if you need to schedule another meeting, you just let me know. No, I say that just to be, but the biggest thing that I've seen and something I really try to strive for is developing a sense of urgency to change things. A lot of times kind of we've been given a task and we're used to having to make it work with 550 cord and duct tape. And that's just, we're just comfortable with the status quo because that's kind of how it's always been. But now that we have some of these tool sets available, some of the ones that we've already mentioned, even CVR was a huge win for us. Now that we have those available, it's now turning to the techie folks that kind of understand the more technical solutions, the faster, more efficient solutions, and giving them the ability to drive that train. Meanwhile, developing that sense of urgency for the people that are just not comfortable with it to change over. Like we mentioned before, the Vantage team, I mean, there was a lot of hesitation to go away from an Excel spreadsheet to this weird, crazy dashboard you made. Like, why do I trust this? Why are these numbers different? Or why doesn't this work? And it's simply because like the military doesn't really, or at least the Army doesn't really, train you for that. There's no urgency to train people in, developing in Vantage, or rather configuring in Vantage. There's not really any development going on. It just doesn't exist because there's not that sense of urgency. So that's really the number one thing I think we could change, is just understand we have that problem and then be willing to change it.
No, awesome. In fact, you brought up the dashboard just a second ago. We have a question from the audience that says, how can we tailor the dashboard, that solution that you guys cooked up? And Brian, you might be able to add some to that. How can you tailor the dashboard to suit other leaders and thinkers? Or is that something that you guys are looking as a follow-up iteration to the dashboard and some of dashboard solutions that you've provided.
Yeah. Did you want to go, Evan, or you want me to grab it?
I can. I've worked on it a bunch, so I'm.
Is she talking about the vaccine dashboard? Or is she talking about the? Because I think it all ties together in the answer I was about to give.
Yeah. Go ahead. Just tie it together.
Yeah. So when we go with innovation, it's like, so the vaccine management application was trying to solve for several different personas. It was the staff sergeant who was checking in. It was the private who's having to make the tick marks on the tally board. It was the major who's having to count the tick marks and put it in an Excel spreadsheet. And then it was the leader who needs to receive the data and make decisions based off the data in a way that he can make those decisions quickly, right? So, that's why I like dashboards, create them all the time, but the most effective dashboards are the ones that convey and provide value to the end user. So what we're doing at 18th Airborne Corps Project Ridgeway is providing value to our soldiers, our commanders, and those who are affiliated with 18th Airborne Corps. So yeah, absolutely. Like the dashboard, like I can make that thing sing and say whatever we want to say, right? As long as the data supports it. But it's who are we trying to influence with that dashboard, and is it meeting their requirements and providing value? So I think that's my comment on that. Evan, did I miss anything?
Just to add, like what you described earlier was a process, specifically one that you automated, and that process was automated. Understood the process. We were with the process, and all we did was make it, seamless. So they drop a file and it populates this thing, and we trust it because I trust that file, right? The hard part is understanding the workflow and understanding the process and making the process right. The easy part is configuring a dashboard, because really all it is it's a no-code platform. It's just drag and drop and make it look pretty. It's essentially a hyped up PowerPoint with live data, and that's really the part. Culturally is getting to the part to where we're comfortable with live data and we're comfortable with things, our assumptions being wrong, and then having to tailor how we do business to correct assumptions, or to get the right assumption rather, and validate that through data, not through kind of opinions. I guess it goes back to that piece is probably the easiest one. You want to tailor it to what we had was 80 seconds board and then Corps' dashboard. So we made two separate dashboards. It was just an easy configuration, but the process underneath it was the same, and it became very tight because, by forcing the functions to kind of do it the right way.
Sure. So definitely, I'm hearing that you guys kind of built in there an ability for scalability, and the simplicity of your model is such that can be adopted to different units and different leaders as needed, right? So it's actually applicable across different use cases. So it's definitely something that sometimes in the U.S. military, right, we build things for specific purposes and then they are not applicable in other things. But with an innovation mindset, you always go into how can this help broader things? How can you scale those things? So I want to circle back to Zach. Zach, back to the question, and I'm actually going to add a little bit more. What, from your perspective, in your work in defense innovation, you think still needs work from a Texas Air Guard perspective, what you're doing? And then also, I'm going to add in there, what do you think we can learn from startups as we continue to iterate and improve on what's probably not still perfect in defense innovation?
So glad you asked about startups, because I really wanted to be able to try to tie it all together. The Guard, we're 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. We're part-timers. We don't have a Brian Masters or an Evan Adams full-time that can do this stuff. If we did, it'd just be a completely different game. It's just hard to get adoption when someone's doing this. And then we're pulled in a million directions. I mentioned some of the missions earlier. I just heard that the Massachusetts National Guard has been activated to drive buses because they can't find people to do it. Like, insane. Like, when I was in the Army, I did not think, you know what? I want to drive buses one day, right? But this is the stuff that we're called to do. It really is crazy. But again, we're part-timers. We're pulled in so many directions. Sometimes it's hard to make that case that you need to try something different or try something innovative, or that the pain of the status quo is worse than trying something new. And I think that is really how I'll connect it to what we can learn from startups. Because if you're a startup, And full disclosure, I guess I have a startup. I started a defense consultancy called ATX Defense. And so with 5 people, I'm going through the what's called hell of like health insurance and benefits and all this other stuff. So I get it. I feel your pain now. I finally feel all of the startup's pain. But when you start a startup, you understand the target you're going after, right? You do the TAM, SAM, SOM, total addressable market, service addressable market, service obtainable market. You have a sense of the problem that you're solving and who you can target. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to have a very successful startup, right? Well, the DoD, sometimes we do it the other way. We say, oh, look, here's a solution. Wouldn't it be great if this had a problem that we could find? And then we go unleash people to go try to find the right problem for that solution. And again, sometimes amazing things come out of it, but the hit rate is way lower and the overall success rate is much lower than it would be is if we really did, like the guys were saying earlier, start with that root cause, start with the problem that we're trying to solve, and then figure out what the right solution is so that it can scale and hit the most of the problem that's possible. Just because, like I said earlier, it's one thing to solve a problem for a small unit or a small organization, but if it's not institutionalized, if it doesn't scale, if it's not something that has that kind of thought put into it, it's hard. It's so much harder than just saying, oh, lost you guys for a second. So much harder than anything else. If that doesn't happen, then I'm afraid that while something will be great for the near term, over time, it'll ultimately disappear and not be relevant. So I'll conclude with that.
No, that's great. That's great input. And, the role of the startup kind of in innovation, I believe, is extremely important. We can learn so much from DoD just by being able to go to the bleeding edge of emerging technology, right? To learn and inform what we as soldiers can really use, right? To move the needle forward for our today's problems, right? A lot of times we look at some of the solutions that might actually be 5 and 10 years antiquated. I can tell you from after 20 years of doing contracting myself, you go put out some things into our normal channels and you're getting 5-year-old technology, when if we just leave the fence and maybe even talk to some startups, you're going to see the bleeding edge that can translate directly into what our soldiers are doing and experiencing outside the gate each and every day. So startups are a great addition and kind of a great part of this whole story of defense innovation. I think we need to continue to foster and bring in startup mentality into what we need to solve soldiers' problems and airmen's problems. Now, I have a question that just came in from the audience. It says that these examples of cultural change inside of the Army units is something that I've heard examples of on and off for the last several years. What are some things that you're doing that's groundbreaking or innovative today that is something that you would not or could not have been able to do a year ago? So basically, what's happening now? Like what is innovative today, or what processes or procedures have opened up in such a way that you would not be able to do what you're pursuing today just a year ago? So Brian, go.
So I would say that innovation has been occurring, as long as I've been in the Army, 20 years, and it's there. It's just we have the platforms to discuss it, and then we have interest. Whether it's social media, whether it's just CVR, like Adam said, or Evan said, where we can collaborate on. No,
he's saying no.
So where we can collaborate more freely, but I think innovations happened. It's just now we have a spot to do it. And secondly, and again, I can only represent 18th Airborne Corps, Project Ridgeway, and what we do. It's about providing value. And the Army, I don't know if it's still a slogan, but winning matters. So we can talk about innovation. We can write papers or do whatever, right? But we're not in the business of innovation theater. We're America's contingency corps, so we have a job to do, and then we have to execute that. So being able to provide value to the battlefield to our commanders is what's important to us.
Evan, you were saying no, so thanks for that, Brian. Evan, you were saying no. I'm really interested. Why were you nodding your head?
I was just saying no because he messed up my name, and it's a common thing that people will say, "Call me Adam," or they'll call me Major Evans.
Oh.
So I have to take this opportunity to make fun of Brian now. But no, just to add on to what he said, like we have a lot more tools than we used to, and it used to be 550 core duct tape solution, but now it translates over to, hey, we can just build a database that we host internally that we then automate the streams and stuff. So we take the current procedure and just drop it into a system that actually kind of does some of the work for us. And it goes away from, again, kind of the duct tape solutions that we used to innovate. And now it's a digital solution that we innovate.
I love it. Love it. And Zach, let's round out with you. We're going to wrap it up on that question from an air guard perspective or just TMD perspective. I mean, how do you see that? What are we able to do now from an Air National Guard perspective that would have never been fathomed just a couple years ago?
I think very abstractly, we're able to play at the cutting edge of technology. I mean, I at least growing up in the Guard, and I had some time away, but it was this idea that you're not going to have the tools that you need. You're going to have whatever active duty you didn't want, or for whatever myriad number of reasons and rules, you're not going to be able to easily get the mission done. Of course, you'll get it done. This is the Guard, but it won't be easy. I think that's the biggest change for us, is just this idea that we realized that actually that was how it was. That's not the rules anymore. And we can harness this innovative spirit of the Guard to find ways to bring in technology to solve problems that can then scale across our force and do things that people just can't believe. One example that I know you're tracking is it's in the process, but we may be able to have high bandwidth, low latency, exponentially 20, 50 times faster communications with the internet and the outside world at our Guard bases in the very near term, which is something active duty would kill for. But we were able to find a way to make it happen. And just this idea of this experimentation and rapid iteration, I think I don't often quote the National Defense Strategy, but I will in my final comment. In the 2018 National Defense Strategy, it says that the winners of the next wars is simply not the ones that will make the new technology. They're the ones that will adapt it and integrate it into their way of fighting. And I think when you look at that, again, it's not just enough to have this amazing technology or even to solve a problem for a single organization. To adapt it, to integrate it, to scale it, that's how you win the next war. And I think that's something that hopefully the active component can look to the Guard to do, and we can do it together. We're all in this together.
Awesome. I love that message of inclusivity and everything. And I just want to thank all of you guys again. You're great patriots in my book. It's an honor to see what you guys are doing, the courage that it takes to kind of change the system and even sometimes buck culture a little bit in order to bring lethality back to our warfighter and bring capability to the service member to help protect our nation. So Chief Brian Masters, Major Evan Adams, Colonel Zach Walker, it's like, again, an honor. Thank you so much for talking about crushing culture and how we get tactical and what's going on down in your unit. So super awesome to have you again. Again, once again, it's an honor, and I salute all you guys. So safe passages, and we'll hope to see you sometime on the flip side. So I'm going to bring in now Brian Cook. Brian, are you online?
Hope I am. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Always. First of all, thank you, Jorge, man. That was a great second half of this. What an amazing morning of diverse insights across the defense innovation ecosystem. Thank you for leading that. That was super well done. Top notch as always. And thanks again to Evan, not Adam, and Zach and Brian. I really, really like the piece of part there. Like, it is very solidly a value proposition from the bottom to the top and back down in 18th Airborne Corps. You can hear General Donahue talk or General Kurilla talk or Brian talk. It doesn't matter who you walk up to. And that's what I find is that's culture, right? When you hear it from multiple levels,
yes,
it's about providing that value that the culture needs. The other thing I really like was that design thinking approach, solving challenges for several personas, right? So that's super hard. I mean, that's PhD level design when you start doing these iterations and changing them and referring back. I mean, there was a conversation there that we were talking about CI/CD for for the ATOs and keeping it fresh in the system. That's not easy when you're making that many changes. So what a great conversation to take defense innovation to a higher level around culture. So I thought it was really extremely valuable. Now that we're coming to the end of TDID, I wanted to shift gears for a second, and we're going to take a look at a short video from Fed Supernova, and I think the team is going to just cue it in the background to me or in the foreground to me so that we can see what's coming out. And it's 29 September coming right on the back of this webinar. With that, let's cue the video. Well, I'm back. So that is a teaser, if anything is. So what I want to tell you is this is new. This is a new way to go Federal Supernova. Last time, Fed Supernova, the last couple times, we went functionally and did things like quantum, space, hybrid cloud. And it was, I thought it was terrific. But what we're doing now is we're going to take it by service incubators. So you're going to have an AFWorks, a DIU, Army Futures Command tracks that are going on. And what's even more interesting to me is the team of teams that cultivated and curated the conversations. They actually brought teams from other services and cultures into the conversation. So just because you're in the Army track does not mean you'll only hear from Army people. They're actually taking people from the Air Force and other places that have great ideas and combining them up with their leaders. So check it out. You can go on right now, go on there's a Fed Supernova website, and you can see all the leaders. I mean, it's like 3 pages of leaders, and it's just going to be a super exciting event here at the end of September for Austin and the whole defense innovation ecosystem. So part of the idea here was to cue that and curate that conversation. So if there's anything that you need more of, less of, the detail of, heck, if you want to hear more about convergence or Ridgeway, feel free to open up the questions. I'm here. I know many of our audience members would love to hear from you too. So you can source us out either on our LinkedIn here in Capital Factory at the Union or on our personal emails. But that always available to have that conversation as we lead forward. And we hope we can connect that great conversation that's curated at Fed Supernova into success at other events like AUSA coming down the pike here in early October. So that brings us a close to the third Texas Dialogue on Innovation and Defense. Thanks for those who stuck with us. I know we had a number of technical challenges, and it really was a challenge sometimes to get to and hear some of our panelists, and that's our fault. We own that, and we're going to get better at that. Thanks to all the 6 panelists for providing really insightful content for us to think about. There are things that I just learned today and wrote into my notebook and went, wait, I got to get back on, get back with Kristen or think deeply about X, Y, or Z. I'll bring up the point, is MOS just an antiquated way to think of personnel? Wow. I mean, we could go at it totally differently. So I thank our panelists, all the panelists, for giving great content. And I hope that did the same thing for you and your minds and your cognitive experience. We hope that you had a great day for the rest of the day and a great weekend. Thanks again for coming out to TDID.